Welcome everyone to the Moisky News for April the 5th, 2021. Today I'd like to discuss the Kill the Bill protests. Kill the Bill has been trending quite a number of times on Twitter. Kill the Bill is a reference to the Coronavirus Act, i.e. legislation that has passed or been passed or extended until September of this year that in any way infringes upon the rights of the people. Now I do want to insert this remark now. People have said multiple times, this is what you voted for, but this is not what we voted for. When the Conservatives were voted into office in 2019 with a massive majority, it was entirely because Labour failed fundamentally to deal with anti-Semitism and because at the time, Jeremy Corbyn did not have a solid position on Brexit and his shadow cabinet had a contradictory position on Brexit, i.e. negotiate a great deal and then campaign against it to keep us in the EU, which means they were voted into office months before coronavirus became an issue in the United Kingdom, an issue that has now taken up a year of people's lives, and it has gotten to the point where people are quite frankly done with this. I myself want to go back to the gym. I am sick and tired of walking around, running around, riding around. Give me a bloody gym. The more recent protests many have seen and heard of come in the wake of the murder of Sarah Everard. As that is an ongoing case, we're not going to comment on it. Protests in question circle around a vigil that was held for her, but the vigil did in fact breach coronavirus restrictions, so the police had to get involved. Current restrictions allow people to go to, for example, church, and yet you've seen in the news police breaking up Easter Sunday Mass because they're geniuses. They think they know the law better. Turns out they don't. One of the rights taken away by the Coronavirus Act by default, to be honest, is the ability for people to peacefully assemble. This particular term does have a context. The context for this is protesting. So for example, since 2020, groups like Black Lives Matter have struggled. There have been protests and they have been 2 meters apart. It's been quite entertaining when they tried to spray up Churchill telling us he's racist when we all knew this. Anti-lockdown groups, along with a number of other vigils, they've all contained a police presence to either shut them down or arrest the evil people. MPs have increasingly started to become more fractured on this issue, as many are starting to believe that the Coronavirus Act is draconian. To which I say to them, because it took them a year to work this out, no shit, Sherlock. This has led to some concessions from Boris, promising that lockdowns aren't forever. And nor are the ideas of a COVID passport, a year at most, as if people haven't forfeited enough of their lives because of this bollocks. Due to the murder of Sarah Everard, many MPs that were oddly quiet or not getting much in the way of attention, certainly when their brother was getting arrested for his part in anti-lockdown protests, have decided that, in hindsight, the people should be allowed to peacefully protest. Coronavirus restrictions on this particular person who was on the thumbnail, if you hadn't noticed, meant that because of his age group, he had to stay at home, which meant he hasn't been very vocal. And also at the same time, he can't be very vocal because he's no longer the leader of his party, and he doesn't want to overshadow him. But this man still carries a considerable amount of clout. I am of course talking about Jezza the Playboy Corbyn, a man who himself has broken coronavirus rules at dinner parties, and for appearing in Parliament against those very restrictions. He has in fact been quite active when it came to voting on certain legislation related to coronavirus, financial support bills. He voted against some because it wasn't enough. At a Kill the Bill protest over the weekend, in Parliament Square, central London, Jeremy Corbyn invoked figures such as the suffragettes, Nelson Mandela, and urged the crowd to oppose the bill, being quoted as saying, "Stand up for the right to protest. Stand up for the right to have your voice heard," with him also pointing out that protests against the bill were only sparked because the police dispersed a crowd at a perfectly correct and proper vigil for Sarah Everard, saying, "I want a society where it is safe to walk the streets, where you can speak out, where you can demonstrate and you don't have to seek permission from the police or the Home Secretary to do so." This might sound a tad strange for me to say, but Jeremy Corbyn at protests being quite frankly anti-government, is exactly where Jeremy Corbyn is at both his strongest and most capable. He has a point about police powers because they have too many now, and the fact that there is utterly zero power for the people. At this point, all the people can do is vote, and even that's done electronically. Unless this ends soon, and this Coronavirus Act is killed, the protests are going to get worse. And that includes those within Parliament who are no longer voting with their party, because regardless of age group, they no longer believe this to be right. And they have a point. And while I'm not overly fond of the extensive spending, Jeremy also has a point on his own Twitter where he points out those who are not eligible based on arbitrary criteria for certain assistance. If you can't help the people, then why brag about the amount of money you're spending helping the people? Money is not a buzzword. It's a weird flex, okay?